Hello everyone, I'm Marijke from the city of Antwerp, where I'm the coordinator of Civitas Parties and also the program manager for the Smart Mobility program that's been run in the city. Today I'm going to talk about the way that we have tried to implement our SUMP, which was produced in 2015, into a kind of smart mobility app, and how we are trying to pave the way for the introduction of mobility as a service. In case you've got any questions, please write them down in the chat box on the right side of the webinar, and we'll address all the questions you have at the end of the session. So when all the three speakers are finished with their story. So here we go for the story of the city of Antwerp. It starts all the way back in January 2015, where we had the wild idea to start building our own route planning device and to start to come up with a system for traffic management. The reason why we started to do that was because Antwerp is one of the cities with quite a lot of congestion, and we knew that quite a number of roadworks were going to be carried out in the next couple of years. So we launched a call for candidates in the market, and the call said we are looking for candidates or companies who can provide us with traffic data and a number of traffic services like travel planning and traffic management. Unfortunately, the call was more or less misunderstood, for we had 4 competitors who entered the selection, 2 hardware companies who thought that what we were looking for were companies who were going to build actually beacons and magnetic kind of hardwires that were to be put into the roads. But actually we were looking for software companies. Unfortunately, we had 2 of them as well entering the tender. We knew by then that the tender should be far more specific and should really focus on which kind of traffic data we wanted to gather and the purpose of the services that we wanted to develop in the city. One kind of remark now: whenever you see a kind of a gray box entering in the slide, this is all about the process and how we went about the development of our smart mobility app. Whenever you see something in red, well, that's related to what we are actually doing online in the online section and what end users were able to see or were getting from us. Because most of the roadworks were going to start somewhere in the middle of 2015. Of course, they got delayed and eventually it was 2016. But anyhow, there was kind of a large pressure to get anything up and running by the end of 2015. So what we got ready by then was a kind of a temporary site providing mobility information or information that we thought might be useful for anybody traveling in the city of Antwerp. And this consisted of GIS data, which was, at the very start, visualized in a very accessible mobility map. And it was all integrated in our city's website, the www.antwerp.be. And it looked more or less like this. It showed what kind of data we had at the time. We had data layers covering the spaces where you could find shared cars, where the car-free zones were. You could find bus stops, bus lines, the cycling network, the area where we were going to introduce the low emission zone, and so on. But still, people had to know that this map existed and had to find their way around. And this proved a huge task for end users. It became even more difficult for end users because most of these data that we provided were not owned by the city, so they were not the end product of our own processes, but we gathered them from a lot of third parties, like, for instance, one of our partners, the public transport company called the Lijn, which operates buses and trams in the city. And this is an example of the data we've got from them. They've gathered data on bus stops and tram lines, but they present it in a very technical way. So when you look at a little circle in the middle, which says 26, this means that there are 26 bus lines and tram lines stopping at this particular place, but it's not very informative from an end user's perspective. So these were the kind of things that we met in 2015, and we knew they were going to be tough challenges if we wanted to end up with a smart mobility app or even a travel planner, as we were hoping to launch. So what we tried to do first was build upon all these traffic or mobility data, and we released a true website which was devoted to smart ways to Antwerp at the beginning of February 2016. So we had been working very hard on the data. We had by then selected a company that could provide us with data on traffic intensity. And we mingled that with all the static mobility information that we had already gathered in the course of 2015. And then we started to build a travel planner. And that was the first update of the website that we released in 2016. But it took us quite some effort because we had the company on board as of February 2016, and they were able to provide us with quite a lot of data already right from the start. But we wanted to build a travel planner that did more than, for instance, what Waze did or what Google Maps did. And the first version was a unimodal travel planner, but it differed already from Waze and Google Maps in that respect, that it contained a lot of advice that took into account for instance, the major roadworks and the detours as we prefer them, and not the detours that Waze usually comes up with. And this meant that we really had to think about the algorithms, because you have to find a way that the computer doesn't really take into account the fastest route, but the most preferred route from the perspective of road safety, for instance. So if the quickest route passes through a 30 kilometers per hour zone, or passes through a street where there are a number of schools or play gardens for children, well, then you have to avoid that cars start entering these streets. So the detour really have to take all this into account. And for this, we used the road hierarchy as it was laid out in our SUMP, a road hierarchy which really defines which roads are there for cars, which roads are there for freight, which roads are there for public transport, and which roads or streets are there really only for the inhabitants or for the residents. So where do we want the cars to be, only to be if they are needed there, and otherwise they shouldn't be there. So this already took quite a lot of mathematical thinking through. And we did something else, because we knew that Antwerp, since it's a port city, it attracts a lot of international transport within the city boundaries and through the city as well. So we knew that whatever we were going to build had to be multilingual. And also this is a challenge, because most route planners are built in only one language when they are focusing at a particular zone. But since this is an international city, it had to be international. So we started to build a site in 4 languages, which is a challenge by itself. And we also had to prepare for the introduction of the low emission zone and the number of services which were linked to the introduction of this low emission zone. So we had to build in a check tool, a registration tool, a day permit, a service where you could buy a day permit, or even a temporary permit if your car is not really fit to enter the low emission zone, but you need to be there anyhow. So this was something that we really built by ourselves and added as a new feature. We also opened these data and services for other providers, but as still today, we haven't seen any provider coming in and taking up making use of this service, because they don't see why it's a use case. Although in the city of Antwerp today, a lot of our revenue comes from the fact that people really don't know, are not aware of the fact that they're entering a low emission zone, and they have to pay a retribution when they were not able or their car was not fit to enter the city. And then the biggest challenge came because the biggest roadwork was going to take place in the middle of 2017. So by June 17, we really had to change the algorithms for all the routings towards the city center. And we had to introduce a new access plan. And this was really stepping up to the challenge that we already had to meet for the first unimodal travel planner. This is how the travel planner looked, of what the travel planner looked like in 2016. But by now it has already been changed again because we've put it through a number of user tests. What we also did in the course of 2016, we were not the only ones trying to come up with a smart mobility solution for the challenges that we face in the city of Antwerp. We also tried to find some partners. And for that, we launched the Marketplace for Mobility. And right from the start, we had a number of mobility partners who offered a number of ready-made solutions. Good example is, for instance, Taxi Stop, who are heavily involved in the European project Social Car, but also Cambio, which is a car-sharing platform. And we had project partners who had great ideas, like, for instance, Cloudbike, which is a free floating bike sharing system, but they were entering the competition as a startup. And then we also started a tender to attract services to avoid car use during rush hours. And this was a way of finding smart mobility partners. In the meanwhile, we were back at our own desk, trying to come up with a true multimodal travel planner. And this is something that we've been working on in the course of the past year. So from June till December 2017, we have been really implementing quite a number of new algorithms that take into account the most ideal ways that the most ideal ways to travel in an urban environment. And this is ways of promoting the bicycle, ways of promoting the combination of, for instance, cycling and public transport, and ways of finding combinations of car use and public transport and biking and walking. So this was a true challenge because not many apps are already available, and the big players are not really interested in developing all these connecting kind of devices. And at the same time, we also try to integrate real-time information, but this is still a very big challenge. And this has got to do with the computational power that you need to make multimodal advice work. And when you have to enter real-time information, it becomes even more complicated. We were able to launch the multimodal travel planner together with a new and totally redesigned website by the end of December 2017. And as of today, we have more than 200,000 persons or people who have been trying to use this travel planner, and it's improving every day. But since the travel planner is a website and it takes a lot of time to download, it takes a lot of memory from your smartphone and from your even from your laptop. We also developed an app, and we will be the proud presenters of this app as of the 13th of June coming up. So next week, the app will be available and be downloadable from Android App Store and the Google App Store and the Apple App Store. The difference between the website and the app is that in the app, travelers will be able to get travel advice based on their own preferences. So they'll be able to indicate whether they have a foldable bike, or whether they have a year pass for public transport, or whether they don't like walking. And these are all preferences that the travel planner can take into account. And moreover, it'll give you travel assistance with the help of a GPS component. And also, this is something you can't do on a mobile website. So it's a feature we've introduced there. Of course, the app still needs some refinement after the first release, so it is going to be updated the next couple of months. This is what the website looks like today, and it starts really with an offering towards the route planner is the first item you see. But at the same time, we also show you what we call the smart map of the city and its region. So you can see the level of congestion whenever you open the website. And it's incredible, but we have as many users of the travel planner as of the smart map. So people really think that the information that we offer on the smart map is very valuable for them as well. This is what a travel advice looks like, and it's a bit odd to look at first. So it shows you, for instance, when you have to travel a distance of about 20 kilometers towards the city of Antwerp, it might be smart and it might be wise to use the car first, but in order to avoid a blockage, which is a very often congested roadway, it'll put you on the tram and then advise you to cycle a little bit further by the means of Velo, which is our shared bike system here in Antwerp. And this is what you see here on this map. So the red advice is car, the green one is the tram, and the orange one, the last bit, or the last mile, you can say, is being covered by our shared bike Velo. And of course, you still have to walk a little distance because Velo stations are fixed stations in the city center, and it's not in front of every door. So that's the last bit. So you have a combination here of 4 different modes, and I think very little apps do this. But this is the way that we like people to travel towards the city and in the city, choosing for sustainable modes of transport. This is what the app will look like when it will be launched next week. So it's very similar to the website, but you can see that the preferences are there and that people can really choose how they would like to travel through the city. So this is a scoop or a kind of a premiere for next week. In the meantime, we've been experimenting also with partners who have launched apps in the city center or in the city of Antwerp. And 2 of these apps were winners of the tender services to avoid car use in rush hours. One of them is called Time's Up, which is an app which gives you really a sustainable routed travel advice based on your agenda. So it'll tell you to leave for a meeting which is outdoors, and it'll tell you this way on beforehand if you want to use your car. But it'll also tell you how much time you can save when you would choose for public transport, or if you would choose a bike or even electrical bike, because in the city center, bikes are often the smartest and quickest way to get around. Another app is called Olympus Mobility, and that's actually a B2B or a business-to-business solution, which is really the first kind of mobility as a service item. It offers employees which are linked to a particular employer the opportunity to work with a kind of mobility budget and make use of public transport, tram, bus, train, or even shared bikes, or even shared cars to cover all their work-related travels and journeys. These 2 apps, it was difficult to get them to launch them in the city because people are not used to look at mobility that is as something that can come from your smartphone. People look at mobility as something that is featured by really hard devices like bikes, trams, buses, and cars or trains. But now they have been on the market for about almost a year, and uptake is really now growing. And also companies see that it's an extra feature, and to avoid very frustrated employees who get stuck in the congestion around the city of Antwerp or around the port of Antwerp. So the uptake is now surging again. And what's happening at the same time, we launched a second call for projects. This time we had a lot of competitors entering the marketplace for mobility, almost 40 competitors, 8 of which offer true smart solutions and 3 of which offer MaaS-like solutions. And this has given us the opportunity as the City of Antwerp to work together with potential MaaS providers and to see what the barriers are that they meet when they want to aggregate their mobility packages and when they want to go to market in a particular area. These are the solutions which are really the smart ones, which came out of the call that we launched in September 2017. You see, of course, RIM, which is launched by MaaS Global, but more local ones are Optimile and even the 4411. These are very local MaaS providers. But there are other smart solutions like Haka and Avantida who offer smart solutions for logistics. Because we are a port city, we also need we also need smart solutions for the solving of all the containers that are being moved around in our port. And today, well, we're about to launch our app, but we're already planning to work on a second launch of our Smart Waste to Antwerp app, which will link, of course, travel advice with ticketing. And we hope to be able to link our travel advice also with real-time data from the public transport partners. We also hope to be able to roll out a number of B2C MaaS formulas in the city, and we hope to be able to do this somewhere around September so that we can really see what the impact is on the ways that people in Antwerp travel around. This is becoming very pressing indeed, because the biggest roadworks are still lying ahead of us, and they're going to start at the end of 2018. So we're really looking at MaaS as a way of getting people out of their cars and shifting towards more sustainable modes of mobility. Main lessons learned for us now, because we are a governmental partner that is trying to provide a number of services by itself, but it's also working in close collaboration with MaaS providers and with our customers, because we're in direct relation with them as well, is that there is a big need for protocols for open data and to standards for data, but there's also need to align legislation, because cities have legislation, but you have legislation at a regional level or even at a federal level. And if we don't align our legislation, then it might become counterproductive or even perverse. But more important, there is the need and the readiness to share customer insights and the mobility impact of what everybody is doing, because that's the only way to go forward and to learn from what is going on right now in our city. That's it for me. If you'd like to contact me, these are my contact data. I thank you very much for listening and look forward to answering your questions right away.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting us to be here today. Thank you to SIMPLA project. My name is Sergio Fernández Balaguer. I work for the Public Transport Company of Madrid, coordinate the research projects department. So according to the presentation, as you can see on the screen, I would like to tell you a little bit more about the mobility challenges we are facing in the city of Madrid and some possible solutions. First of all, let me introduce you EMT Madrid. EMT Madrid is quite an old company, created in 1947, 100% owned by Madrid City Council. We provide service 24/7 every day of the year, and we are in direct charge of managing the urban bus network. But since 2013, we've been also providing some additional services, mobility services, such as city parkings, underground parking facilities, the tow trucks. Since October 2016, we are also in charge of managing the public bike sharing system of the city, BiciMat, and we do provide also technical assistance to Madrid City Council in many topics, such as electric mobility or mobility modeling, mobility management, mobility governance, etc. So at the moment, our fleet is quite big. We are the biggest company of this kind. We have more than 2,000 buses. We transport about 430 million passengers a year in 2010 bus lines. We have 82 cranes. We have 21 parking facilities with more than 5,000 parking lots. And the public bike sharing system, for instance, has more than 2,000 pedelecs. And since February 1st, we are also in charge of managing the cable car of the city. And to manage all that, the company has more than 9,500 employees. So the truth is that EMT is quite a big company that has shifted from being just a bus operator to a mobility operator, which is a much wider scope, including innovation at the core of the service. Some examples about this is we were the first transport operator at international level offering information to the customer via SMS about the expected arrival time of the bus in 2004. We were the first transport operator in Spain developing an application for phones in 2005. We were also the first operator in Spain with an open data policy in 2006 and an open data portal in 2012. Also the first bus operator in the world offering free Wi-Fi on board all our fleet in 2010. Also the first operator in Spain testing contactless credit card payment systems, and also the first bus company in Europe using compressed natural gas hybrid buses. We have 23 units at the moment. And we are one of the largest companies with the largest fleet of buses operating with alternative fuels in Europe, 86% of the total fleet. So this is a picture of all the services we provide in terms of mobility, which is also very important for us because we can cover wider spectrum. Then if we go to the point of the city of Madrid, you already know about the capital of Spain. We are the biggest city with 3.2 million inhabitants, the third most populated city in the European Union, with about 7% of the total Spain population, and up to more than 5 million people in the metropolitan area. The city receives more than 9 million visitors per year, and we count up to 12% of the total GDP of the country. We have the first airport in Spain, the fifth in Europe in terms of traffic, with more than 50 million passengers, which make us quite a big hub in terms of logistics. There are more than 15,000 taxis, and the car ownership average is 461 cars per 1,000 inhabitants, and more than 1 million cars enter the city every day. So with these figures in your mind, you can imagine that the city is quite a complex ecosystem that is very influenced by the way we think and the way we behave, especially public administrations. This is just to illustrate you the idea how some public spaces of the city have changed through the ages. The Plaza Mayor, this is how it looked like in the 19th century as a big park. Then in the 60s, in the 20th century, it was a car park. Quite amazing, quite shocking, right? And now this is how it looks like today. So it's a matter of changing our behavior and our way of thinking, not only public administrations, but also ourselves. So this poses several challenges. The first one could be, or would be, air quality, directly related to health. At the moment in Madrid, road transport and car traffic is the main responsible for greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants, with 56% of the total NOx, 65% of particle matter, and 34% of greenhouse gas emissions. This is how it looks like the last inventory we did in the city. At the moment, we are finishing the new one. But as you can see here, the biggest part of the cake comes from private cars with that mileage and emissions. But also there is a big part of it which remains or relies on light commercial vehicles, taxis and buses. So we have still some challenges ahead in terms of congestions, for instance, the lack of competitiveness of public transport when they got stuck in a traffic jam together with the traffic. This is a picture of Plaza de Castilla in Madrid. But also when accessing or leaving the city, congestion is really a thing to fight against. So in terms of public space overuse, congestion, noise, and equity, sometimes we can talk about electric mobility as the big solution. But the truth is that it's not only the only solution, is part of the solution. And we must have a holistic approach. Just to give you some ideas on how electric mobility is evolving in the city at the moment, Madrid is leading the national market. At the national level, 33% of the total EV market comes from Madrid, and basically from the city of Madrid. But if we think about what we have done to improve mobility and decarbonized mobility in the city of Madrid, I must say it hasn't been an easy way. So it comes from back in time. We first started working in 2009 with a project steered by the national government to set the first public charging infrastructure in the city. But then we started a process of dialogue and knowledge exchange with different organizations, stakeholders, universities, companies, etc. in 2010. After that, it was also very important to promote and disseminate the advantages of electric mobility, signing agreements and partnerships with different OEMs and stakeholders, promoting events, launching a web with all the information to citizens. And finally, to gather more experience, we also became involved in some international projects promoted or fostered or under the framework of different organizations. MaaS, for instance, was with the European Investment Bank to promote the uptake of electric fleet. eView was a project under the framework of the Umwelt program to develop the first electric mobility strategy of the city. Freeview was a project, a 7 framework program project with many cities around Europe to promote electric vehicles for urban freight. So all this was really important and it helped us a lot. But the truth is that what is the most important thing is to use all this to develop policies. So finally, this is the outcome, is how to develop policies that can help cities to go forward and take advantage of the good aspects of, in this case, electric mobility, and not taking the worst or the bad aspects. So regulations, strategies, plans, incentives, measures. At the moment, the city of Madrid has implemented several incentives for electric vehicles, such as reduction of the local tax, free parking all around the city, free access to some restricted access areas, and that has helped very much in promoting this, but also measures regarding captive fleets. That's what we call regarding public transport, etc. So the main tool we are using at the moment as a policy, like the main book we are using, is the new so-called Plan A. The Plan A was approved September 21st in 2017, so last year, and it merges the former air quality plan together with the climate change plan. It has 30 measures, 23 of them are mobility related, so that gives you an idea on the importance of mobility in the overall picture of air quality in Madrid. But what is really relevant or innovative is the different approach we have given to it. So that's what we call classic versus new. The classic model was the polluter pays principle. That means if you can pay, you can pollute, then you can drive your vehicle. But the truth is that we consider that the freedom of movement shouldn't be related to mobility price, because that fosters inequity. That means that higher incomes can drive. So the new approach we have given to this Plan A is that the freedom of movement must be related to the right to health. That means that higher environmental friendly can drive. This raises equity. So the parking option is related to pollutant level, there are social, public transport prices, introducing alternatives, modes, removing car space, And the trend is, if you pollute, you cannot drive. So just to give you some overview on these measures that the Plan A includes in terms of mobility, the first one could be or would be a low-emission public transport. So here we include EMT, the public transport company, and the taxi sector. So regarding public transport fleet, EMT is fully committed with sustainability and the search for alternatives to revert the impact of transport on the environment. So the aim is to provide the best service in Madrid. At the moment, as I mentioned before, we are using different technologies and alternative fuels, but we have developed a strategy to become, by 2020, 100% using alternative fuels. And then we will reduce also the average average age of our fleet to have the most sustainable one. So from 9.3 years down to 6.7 by the end of 2019. This is one of the measures. An example, in 2016 we purchased 200 new buses, and 400 new ones, compressed natural gas ones, are scheduled to be purchased between 2017 and 2018. Then, for instance, just some months ago, we purchased also our first 15 fully electric, 12 meters long buses. We had fully electric buses before, microbuses, since 2007, but now we are shifting towards midi buses or regular size buses, fully electric. We launched last December the first bus line running with fully electric buses charging by induction. So they charge conductively by night and then inductively during operational time. And it's a project we have developed ourselves, so quite also a research and an innovative project. Regarding the taxi fleet, at the moment there are only 30 of them. They are Nissan Leaf, but the aim of the city is that from last 1st of January, all new vehicles authorized to be used in Madrid and its metropolitan area will have to comply with some environmental standards. So only zero emissions or eco. That means liquefied petrol gas, compressed natural gas, and hybrids. And from the 1st of January 2025, all the taxi vehicles must be zero emission and eco. So diesel and petrol conventional cars will be banned completely. Then, to help the sector, these are the measures 12 and 13, we have also grants and subsidies for the procurement of clean taxis. So 1,000 euros per vehicle, compatible also with the national and regional funding programs. The regional government provides up to 8,000 euros, for example, and also the exemption on city tax for the authorization of new taxi vehicles. If we talk about freight, the main aim is how to optimize freight operations within the first ring of the city. So managing on-street loading zones. In Madrid, in the center of the city, at the moment there are 2,449 loading zones. The aim is to redesign and redistribute these loading zones and to create a register of urban freight vehicles and operators. So this will be mandatory for all logistic operators if they want to deliver through the center of the city to register the vehicles. And then the management of all the loading zones will be done through a mobile phone app it's still being developed. And it will be controlled by the Madrid regulated on-street parking area system. So this will lead us to define incentives in terms of the most sustainable fleet will be able to have some wider delivery windows, for instance, and the most pollutant vehicles will be banned from urban freight delivery through the center of the city. The next measure will be about charging infrastructure, for instance, alternative fuels infrastructure. So we are working in developing the first fast charging network through the city with 50 kilowatts charging points in AC, DC, also having the three types of connectors, Menecas, Combo, and Shademo. And we just recently launched the first, let's say, electric petrol station in one of the main squares of the city, which is open to public, and also setting since last 1st of May the new fares and pricing for this charging. In addition to that, the city of Madrid is also working hand by hand with the private sector to implement fast charging at the petrol stations, easing permits, etc. At the moment, there are 2 of them in 2 petrol stations. Regarding electric shared mobility, well, the public bike sharing system of Madrid is fully formed by pedelecs. So these are some data you can see on the screen. It's working quite well. I must admit that the system had was in trouble by mid-2016 due to some problems, technical problems of the private company that had the concession. But in October 2016, the system was taken over by EMT. So the city council decided to stop the concession, the private concession, and EMT, as a public transport company, took over the role of the private manager. And it's working quite well. It's been also very useful to foster additional policies in terms of cycling and promotion of the use of cycles in the city. And at the moment, we are developing some cycling infrastructure through the central area of the city, and we are enlarging the system with additional cycling stations. Shared mobility at the moment is also quite at the forefront. It's kind of a hot topic in Madrid because, as you may have heard, at the moment Madrid is one of the cities in Europe with the highest number of electric fleet in terms of shared mobility. We have 3 companies, free-floating car-sharing companies operating in the city with fully electric cars, more than 1,600 vehicles. It's Car2Go, eMove, and City is the 3rd one. And the 4th one, called Weibel, will be launched very shortly with plug-in hybrids. So this will also let them to go beyond the city borders, providing service. In terms of motor sharing, we have 4 companies at the moment: eCultra, Movin, eScoot, and Movo, and a 5th one also will be launched shortly, all of them using electric motorbikes. So this is also being used by the city to help change in behavior about car ownership or motor ownership, and trying to convince people about, well, the lack of need, really. There is no need of owning a vehicle in the city. It's working really well with some records in terms of users, and we are really leading electric shared mobility at the moment in Madrid. And finally, just to end, also things we are working on is how to improve information, because here on the screen you can see the results, though it's in Spanish. Is the study on habits of non-users of public transport from last year. ATUC is the association, the Spanish Association of Public Transport Operators. And as you can see here in the group 1, which is big cities with more than 1 million inhabitants, it's amazing that 22% of the people don't know if they could be using public transport for their daily trips. So it's really shocking. So to improve this, we are working at the moment in further integration in mobility as a service. So still from the public sector, EMT, us, we are developing a mobility as a service app to integrate all the options in terms of mobility, including also additional services such as the charging infrastructure, car parks, etc., to help people to shift towards public transport and make more rational use of the private car. So final remarks: success factors, among others, urban policies and strategies. The political will is really keen. It's really needed. Communication, clear priorities, messages, cooperation among stakeholders, including public administrations, legal frameworks, stable financing schemes, awareness rating, which is really, again, linked to communication. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to tell me. I would be delighted to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation to present smart mobility in Berlin in the framework of this webinar. My name is Thekla Heinel. I'm head of department for international projects and project development in the BSU, Beratungs and Service-Gesellschaft Umwelt in Berlin. BSU is a consulting company working mainly for public clients, and amongst others, we are implementing, for example, the Berlin Program for Sustainable Development, so-called BENE, on behalf of the state of Berlin. And BENE provides funding for innovative projects and initiatives that contribute to a climate-neutral and environmentally friendly Berlin. So, and Berlin is co-financed by the ERDF, and mobility is one important topic of this program. Moreover, we realized also European projects in the field of sustainable mobility funded by the Intelligent Energy Europe program, like, for example, maybe you heard of it, the e-mobility works project. And in the framework of this project, we started also our cooperation with the Berlin Agency for Electromobility, EMO, and they supported us also in the elaboration of this presentation. The Berlin Agency for Electromobility is the central point of contact for smart mobility in the German capital region, which means Berlin and Brandenburg. And it was founded in 2010 on the basis of a decision of the state of Berlin as a coordinator and facilitator of e-mobility in Berlin and in Brandenburg. So today I will present you an overview. Sorry, there's something wrong. An overview about smart mobility in Berlin. Of course, this is a very comprehensive topic, and as the time for the presentation is limited, I will concentrate on some selected topics. I would like to start with the initial situation in Berlin, the integrated strategies, the aims and fields of action defined in these strategies. After this, I would like to focus on some key issues of smart mobility, like mobility as a service sharing solution, urban mobility solutions, autonomous vehicles, corporate fleets, and of course, charging and energy infrastructure. Why has Berlin such an excellent environment for the realization of smart mobility? I would like to highlight some of the very specific and unique baseline conditions we have here in Berlin. We have an excellent and dense network of public transport, which leads to a low state of car ownership. We also have buses, trams, metro, suburban railway and trains operated by a local transport provider, Berliner Verkehrsbetriebe, and the German transport and rail provider, Deutsche Bahn. We have many citizens, especially young persons, with a clear affinity for new mobility concepts and multimodality. Moreover, Berlin is investing in a dynamic landscape of innovative startups, which facilitates the development and realization of new business models in the field of mobility. This is supported by scientific institutions like our universities, for example, Technical University of Berlin, but also by other research-oriented companies and institutions. Cooperation is key for the development and implementation of new and sustainable mobility approaches. This is also underlined by the important input received from global players and competent SMEs located in Berlin. The collaboration between all these players enabled very important projects and developments in the area of mobility. And last but not least, Berlin can profit from the close cooperation with its neighbor, with Berlin and Brandenburg, the state of Brandenburg, especially in the field of renewable energies. In 2014, the state of Berlin adopted an action plan for electromobility, which is, together with the smart city strategy and the urban development plan for mobility, the guideline for the long-term implementation of smart and sustainable mobility solutions. The main principles of the action plan are supporting the region's transport, energy, climate, and environmental policy goals in order to improve quality of the environment and of life, and increasing regional economic power by generating further added value and creating more jobs. This underlines the clear connection of sustainable mobility with economic growth, energy and environmental related policy, and the improvement of quality of life. And it allows also the holistic view, which is important in order to implement an integrated and sustainable strategy. On this slide, you can see the architecture of the e-mobility plan. The clear aim until 2020 is that the region of Berlin-Brandenburg is recognized as a model for electromobility, and the clear integration and reflection of this aim in regional policy strategies. The core fields of action are, on the one hand, technologies, products and services, and on the other hand, transport and mobility. The detailed fields of actions are consequently connected. We have here vehicle systems and energy charging infrastructure for the first core field, and passenger and freight transport for the second field. The aspect of smart mobility is reflected in the field of information and communication technologies, which is linked with both core fields. Education and research and business promotion are seen as cross-sectoral tasks, and the entire strategy is accompanied by coordination and communication tasks. So this is the strategy, but what has been achieved so far by implementing the strategy? We can say that the capital region of Berlin-Brandenburg is the largest test and development region for electromobility in Germany. More than 5,000 electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids are in use in our region. Approximately 75% of these e-vehicles are commercially owned. These are in particular commercial users and car sharers which use e-vehicles in large quantities in the city area. But not only the vehicles are an important indicator. Also, new modes of thinking and operation are the innovative core of smart mobility. The central aspect here is the idea of mobility as a service. We can detect here a rapprochement of individual and public transport, which goes in the direction of an individualized public transport in the future. The product of the future will be the mobility service, not the vehicle. This means emission-free and seamless transport in an optimal way and perfectly on time. In Berlin, we have here, for example, a mobility app which provides the customer with information about the quickest, cheapest and most convenient travel route, including the most appropriate combination of transport modes. According to the individual profile of the customer, a mobility service can be provided that is oriented to the specific needs. This means a shift in paradigm from the car-centered cities to more quality of life and an increase of individual options. Of course, this can as well include possible threats like misuse of data or shift to more energy-consuming transport modes, but this needs to be reflected in strategy and in the approaches. Sharing solutions are an important part of individualized transport services. More and more people do not want to own, but to use vehicles, scooters, and bikes. The variety of sharing solutions available in Berlin offers the full range of all possible choices. More than 8 car-sharing providers offer their services in Berlin. This includes free floating systems and a car sharer which is operated by the national rail provider Deutsche Bahn. This so-called DB Flingster service offers special rates for users which have a Bahn card, a loyalty card of Deutsche Bahn. This makes the use of these cars more attractive and underlines the idea of connected and seamless transport modes. The same model applies as well to the bike sharing of the supermarket chain Lidl. They offer a free floating system in cooperation with Deutsche Bahn, and also here Bahn card holders receive a specific discount. Beside these approaches, we have also a scooter sharing system. You can see here on the slide a ride sharing system, the Clever Shuttle, which operates only e-cars, and the opportunity to rent load bikes for free, which is a project and a service of the Allgemeine Deutsche Fahrradclub, which is the German Cyclist Association. And all these services are connected at the so-called Station of the Future, Südkreuz. At the station Berlin-Südkreuz, Deutsche Bahn, in cooperation with partners from different areas of competence, is testing and developing innovative mobility, information and energy concepts. To give you an idea, Berlin-Südkreuz is with 100,000 passengers daily, the third largest station in Berlin. The aim is to demonstrate here the new concept of stations as a center for sustainable and seamless mobility. The station Südkreuz shows how this can look in concrete terms. At the beginning of 2014, DB Station and Service opened its first self-operated long-distance bus station here. At a mobility station in front of the train station, travelers can rent electric cars can as well electric bikes from a bike sharing system. And mobility monitor shows at a glance dynamic information for the onward journey after arriving by train. Amongst other things, the current departure times for the long distance buses and the locations of available bike and car sharing offers can be viewed in real time. In 2015, the first ride-sharing station was opened where travelers meet for rides. Since August 2015, the electric buses of the Berlin transport provider BVG have been charging their batteries wireless at Südkreuz station. The CO2-free electricity of the station is generated by two vertical wind turbines on the station roof, a photovoltaic system at the charging station for electric vehicles, and by solar movers. The heart of this is an intelligent power grid, a so-called micro-smart grid that optimally controls generation and consumption. In the future, further large solar plants will be installed at Südkreuz station so that the station building will be supplied autonomously with locally produced green electricity. Another hotspot for sustainable mobility in Berlin is the EUREF campus in Schöneberg. This city quarter is a symbol of the energy transition in Germany and the location for companies in the field of energy, sustainability and mobility. Since the beginning of 2008, international companies and research institutes have settled on the EUREF campus. The sustainable concept makes the location a Europe-wide unique center for innovative future projects. With its climate-neutral energy supply, the intelligent energy network, the energy-efficient buildings, the testing platform for e-mobility, and the numerous research projects, the campus proves that energy transition is feasible and affordable. On this area, autonomous driving is tested under real conditions. One of the first self-running e-minivans in Germany has been in use regularly since December 2017. You can see it here on the slide, this small mini e-van. And the vehicle comes from the French company EasyMile. As a semi-public space, the EUREF campus is not only the first field of its kind in Germany, but it's also one of the very few places in the world where self-drive vehicles are in real use. It serves to facilitate and speed up short distances on the campus, for example, in the transport of visitors and employees, but also for the distribution of goods. The automatic system works either with a timetable or on demand, while on the road, additional passengers can go on board. We come to the topic of corporate fleets. In the beginning of 2018, around 2,000 e-cars and nearly 1,500 plug-in hybrids were registered in Berlin. Approximately 75% of them are part of public or corporate fleets. This shows that fleets are an important driver for fostering e-mobility. Therefore, several projects have been implemented in increasing the share of e-vehicles in fleets, also because they can be used to increase awareness and trust in e-mobility amongst citizens. One example is the local transport provider of Berlin. We already heard about BVG. Since August 2015, it has been testing a 6-kilometer bus line with electric buses, you see them here on the slide, between Station Südkreuz and Station Zoo. Inductive charging stations ensure smooth and emission-free operation. The federal government was funding the project with a total of around 4.1 million euros, and the 4 buses of the type Solaris Urbino Electric use 100% of green electricity so that an emission-free operation is assured. Another central aspect, especially in cities like Berlin, with a majority of multi-family houses, is the charging infrastructure. Currently in Berlin, we have around 500 charging stations in the urban area. In addition, charging points in car parks and some basement garages of public housing blocks are available. All charging stations in the urban area use energy from renewable sources in order to assure CO2-free mobility. Now we come to the conclusions of this presentation. Baseline conditions play an important role for the successful implementation of strategies and projects related to smart mobility. They need to be reflected, and strategies has to build on these baseline conditions. Smart mobility strategies are no standing alone solutions. They should be connected and consistent with other existing strategies and should create synergies. Mobility as a service will be a central aspect of future mobility, especially in urban areas, as no longer the ownership of a vehicle is important, but a seamless, convenient and sustainable mobility. And these integrated and seamless solutions will pave the way for more acceptance of these new transport modes. Public and corporate fleets are an important driver to foster e-mobility and increase awareness amongst citizens. If companies are using e-vehicles and communicate these topics, citizens will be encouraged to follow this example. This applies also for charging stations. Especially in urban areas, a dense network is needed to assure sufficient charging capacities. And last but not least, the cooperation of all stakeholders combined with integrated planning and implementation approaches is the basis for success in the field of smart mobility. Thank you very much for your attention.